Good evening and welcome to our webinar, How to Choose Stain for Your Log or Wood Home. I would like to thank Sashco for sponsoring tonight's event. Sashco knows that your log home is a culmination of years of dreaming and planning, backed by a bit, or maybe a lot, of sweat equity. That's why they make only specialty log home products designed to keep your log home in dream-worthy, weatherproof condition. Whether you're finally building your dream home, looking to do some routine maintenance, or in need of a complete log renovation and restoration, Sashco is here to help with expertise and a full system of log home finishing products. Our speaker for this evening is Jim Barnes. Jim is a senior chemist at Sashco and is in charge of formulating, improving, and generally being the most excited and passionate about wood stains. He teaches the stain science classes for Sashco's Zero Failures contractor training seminars and enjoys talking shop with other stain enthusiasts. Before joining Sashco, he spent 15 years with Behr Paint. In his free time, he enjoys tackling big DIY projects, the most recent remodeling his kitchen, and fishing with his 3 sons. Joining Jim for our Q&A this evening is Carice Babcock, Marketing Manager for Sashco's Log Products. She's been with Sashco for 14 years now and still enjoys talking to homeowners on the Log Home Living Forum. She too has 3 sons who enjoy fishing. Before getting started, I wanted to let you know that we will save some time at the end of the event to answer your questions. Questions can be submitted in the question area on the right of your screen throughout the presentation. Jim, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Glad to have you guys all here for our webinar, and we'll get started now. If my mouse will work.
There it works.
There you go. All right. So there you can see me. I'm Jim Barnes, the stain guy over here at Sashco. And you can also see Carice, who's not the stain guy.
That's right. Not the stain guy.
Not the stain guy. And of course, we can't see all of you, all of our homeowners out there or people who are planning to build. Those things are all great. Just so you know, we put on a 2-day seminar for log contractors and store dealers every year. And we help them with the specialized knowledge that they need to really protect log homes in particular. And with that seminar, there's lots of information that's valuable to homeowners too, so we're really happy to share some of that with you guys tonight. So what we're going to cover tonight is a brief look at why color selection is important, at 3 or 4 different kinds of stains that you're going to find out there, how to sample the stain on your home so that you get the look that you really want, and a brief look at how building designs can help or hurt your log or wood home structure and the stain that's on it. As we start off our color selection, one of the things we like to keep in mind is that everyone has their ideal color that they imagine as the ideal log or wood home color. Whether your preference is a golden or a reddish or a brownish color, one of the things to keep in mind is that the more pigmented stains will last longer than the lighter ones. So if you like a golden colored wood, choosing a darker golden colored wood stain will help your stain last longer. And you'll have lower long-term maintenance costs than if you would have maybe a pale yellow color. And the same goes for the reddish colors and the brownish colors. That all happens because the darker colors have more pigments, and all those pigments add additional protection from the sunlight, the UV damage from the sunlight. So a question we often get is, how long should I expect various stains to last on a log home? These numbers are really based on curved whole log construction, which is kind of one of the tougher surfaces to protect because of the curvature of the logs. They see a lot more sunlight and also a lot more water accumulation from rain and snow and things like that, as well as dirt. So they just become really tough surfaces. That's where these numbers come from. If you start off with the clears, they don't have any pigments to help protect them from the UV damage, so they often wear out in just a few months, and at most, maybe a couple years. They really don't last very long at all. Once you start adding pigment into that stain base, though, it really, really helps to improve the longevity, and the more we add, the darker the color gets, but also the longer it can last, going out to maybe 3 to 6 years on these curved log structures. Now, there's a point where if we add more pigments, it's going to make the stain actually go opaque, and it's going to hide all the wood underneath it so that it really becomes basically like a paint. And once you get to that point, that opaque stain can last maybe 4 to 10 years, which we know that's a huge increase over like a transparent stain or even over those transparent and semi-transparent stains.
Just, Carice, I'm just jumping in here quickly, Carice here. We'll have a lot of homeowners who will say, oh, I really like the look of the wood it is right now, right after they've built, or it's that nice blonde color, and I would just want to keep it natural. And what I usually tell homeowners when I'm talking to them on the forum or on the phone or whatever is putting a clear coat on your log home is like putting on an SPF 8 and calling it good. Putting on a stain, a semi-transparent stain with darker pigment in it, is like putting on an SPF 15 and then putting long sleeves over top of that. The UV protection that you get is infinitely better when you're using a darker pigmented stain.
Absolutely right. Well, we talked about the opaque stains, and some of you might be thinking, if opaque stains last so much longer, shouldn't I be using an opaque stain, right, just for the benefit of the wood? Well, opaque stains may last the longest, but because they look like paint, they actually cover up any problems that the logs are experiencing. So if you're having perhaps some water damage or rot, you can't even see that developing underneath the stain until it's too late. If you stick with a transparent or a semi-transparent stain, though, you can see through it, and you can see the beautiful wood, which is part of the reason of having a log home, right? But you can also have the most longevity that you can get out of that stain, and you can watch for those early signs of water damage that occur just as the stain starts to fail, so that you know when it's time to restain. Here's a good example of that right here. If you look at the window here, a window is a prime location to look for water problems, and you can notice that this window sill and the vertical column here both have some darker areas. Let's see if I can get a laser pointer up here. You guys can sort of see. Oh, wait a minute. Don't do that to me. Forward. Aha. All right, laser pointer. All right, there we go. I love technology. If you notice right down here at the corner, it's a little bit darker, if your computer can see that. And down here, the corner here, the wood is just a little bit darker. And that's an early sign of stain failure and really wood damage because of water happening right at that location. If you notice, there's also a lighter log there underneath the windowsill. And that log in this picture was actually replaced because it was rotten. And I don't know what it looked like beforehand, but maybe it had a crack or something like that in the log where it allowed a lot of water into it, and or maybe even underneath the sealant there, just allowed a lot of water in, and it rotted away, and they had to replace it. Well, if the stain was opaque, none of that damage would have been visible, and you wouldn't have even seen the rot until you maybe bumped into that log or something like that, and then literally punctured the actual wood. Well, that's why you don't really want to have an opaque stain. You want to keep it with a transparent or semi-transparent stain. Second point to make on this slide is that color difference you see there between the new wood and an older stain around it, that's pretty common when you do some wood replacements and things like that. And when that happens, pretty much anybody's stain is going to be compatible with some universal colorants, so that you can actually get a little bit better match for the stain color than we see right here. In this case, Sickens was the main stain on the place, and we came back in and we were some of our transformation stain on that portion there. But you can even match stains from different companies better than they did here. Well, if we move beyond just the color of the stain and how transparent or opaque it might be, might get a question, what's a great stain? What makes a great stain? I'm sure that all of you would agree that it needs to look great. That's number one, right? But you'd also like to protect your investment in your log home, and to do that, you need to choose a durable stain that can protect your home from the damaging effects of the weathering, all that water and snow and sunlight and things like that that's going to be happening to it over the life of the stain. So choosing the right stain is pretty darn important. There are lots of stains out there, and only a few of them are really made for logs. Choosing a stain that's made for logs is important because logs move a lot. With temperature and humidity changes and things like that, they actually expand and contract quite a bit. And if you're living in a log home, you can actually hear the home moving around you every day. As you listen, you'll hear pops and knocks and squeaks and things like that throughout the day, especially if you're there in the morning and the sun just starts to hit it and it starts to warm up the outside of the logs. You'll hear it actually moving. Well, since the logs move so much, the stain that you use also needs to be able to move with those logs. Most commonly available stains that are out there that are not made for log structures generally tend to be too hard because they're made for dimensional lumber, like 2x4s and decks and things like that, siding, that really doesn't move very much. So it's worth it to choose a good log stain. Look at our list here. We've already covered the stain color. Next down we see the amount of stain applied, and that's really important. The stain that we're applying is not just a color that's getting put onto the wood. There has to be enough stain on the wood so that it can prevent the water and the UV damage from getting into the wood and damaging it. Application techniques are really important too. Most of us are familiar with painting a home, and you've seen how a coat of stain or paint can be sprayed on, and then a brush is used, mostly to catch the drips and runs, and maybe even things out a little bit. That's fine for regular homes. It isn't quite ideal for log homes, though. That first coat of anything going onto the wood is your one chance to get the foundation of the stain deep into the wood. We strongly encourage applicators to apply log and wood stains a bit differently. A sprayer is used mostly as a pump, just to get a lot of stain onto the logs quickly. And then the real work begins, because usually you are followed up with 1 or 2 people following with block brushes on 4 and 5 foot poles, and they push that stain into the wood by brushing hard and working it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then more stain is even sprayed on and worked in until the wood simply won't take any more stain. And that's what Sashco calls the first coat. Once that's dry, a second coat can be applied by the more normal techniques. You just sort of spray on a thinner layer and you catch the drips. That difference in technique is one place where having a log home specialist stain your home can make a big difference over the average painting contractor who might not work on log homes. Those specialists will also be able to prepare the wood better for staining and can check for and repair rot or prevent it altogether and help you in general with your log structure. Maintaining your home is also really important. If you wait until the stain is flaking and peeling off or is already gone, then there's a lot of expensive prep that has to go on to remove all of that and get it down to basically newly sanded wood before the staining can happen. It is a lot less expensive if you simply can apply another maintenance coat when you see the first signs of stain failure. At that point, you might have a little bit of spot repair, but most of the structure is going to be prepared by a quick power wash before you can stain, and that saves you a lot of money. Whatever stain you choose, and no matter how you apply it, that maintenance is an ongoing process. If you consider the sun and weather exposure differences, the most exposed areas like your railings, they're going to need a lot more monitoring and maintenance than the area that's maybe up underneath your covered porch under the eaves. Up there, it's going to pretty much look the same 10 years from now. But those railings, they experience so much weathering that they might need yearly maintenance to keep them in good condition. That's another place a good log home specialist contractor can help you with in yearly inspections and catching the trouble spots early enough that they can help you minimize the overall maintenance costs of your home.
And just to interject here quickly and provide you guys with a little bit of what to expect on maintenance. In general, you need to be doing maintenance every 3 years. In really exposed areas, it may be sooner. In really protected areas, under porches on the north side of the home, you may get longer out of a good quality stain. But I often hear from homeowners that they're disappointed when they don't get 6 or 7 years out of a stain. Out of semi-transparent stain, 6 or 7 years is stellar performance. So just keep that in mind. Set your expectations early on that you're going to have to do maintenance every 3 years at the minimum, possibly more frequently than that, and budget accordingly. It doesn't mean it's going to be major maintenance. It will likely just be on the south side that you're going to have to do something more regularly, but something to keep in mind. Talking about keeping it in the easy zone, it's the same thing as having an oil change done on your car regularly. Do your maintenance checks and do your maintenance regularly, and don't get into that, what we call the hard zone, which is, on a car having to replace the engine or something like that because you didn't do routine maintenance. That gets very costly very quickly if you don't watch out.
Yeah, it's definitely true that log homes and log structures, even timber structures and things, it's not like the regular stick-built construction that people are used to. So it's just tougher. Well, let's move on to stain types. Most of you are probably thinking that there's only water-based and oil-based stains, but we're going to break out that oil-based stain side just a little bit more, because there are oils that dry out to form a hard film, and there are also oils that never dry. So let's focus a little bit on surface stains like water-based acrylics, shallow penetrating oils, and deep penetrating non-drying oils and things like that. Surface stains, our first category here, are typically just that. They sit on the surface. With good back brushing, you can get them past just that outer layer and into the first wood cell underneath, but really not much more. They're mostly just there on the surface. They're almost all going to be acrylic products, similar to the acrylic house paints that are used on homes all over the world today with great results. Acrylics are naturally water and UV resistant, so they can last a long, long time. The keys for success when using an acrylic stain is starting out with a really well-prepared surface, working that first coat in by back brushing really well, and then choosing a stain that can really move with the logs. Most of the stain-grade acrylics that are geared towards decks are too hard to work really well on logs. Most log stains use softer, more flexible, or even elastic acrylics that can move with the logs for year after year after year. Here's an example of the look that you can get with an acrylic stain. In this case, this is Sashco's Capture Cascade system. It's a beautiful look that can last for lots of years, but only if it's maintained. I've actually been to a home that has had Capture and Cascade on it for 20 years, but they've had their contractor come out every single year and touch up spots and then apply more Cascade clear coat whenever that's necessary. I've also seen homes that have Capture and Cascade that needed to be completely redone after 6 to 8 years because they never did any maintenance. That principle is going to be true no matter what stain you use. If you do your maintenance, it's going to last longer. We also list out a couple other stains here that are acrylic stains, like Permachink's Lifeline stains, which can be pretty good log stains also. And you have Olympic and Sherwin-Williams, Behr, Valspar, lots of other paint companies that also make acrylic stains that are generally geared more towards deck. UV Guard makes some. Benjamin Moore has an acrylic version of their Arbor Coat right here. But if you look at all of these surface stains, they all share some strengths and weaknesses. They're all water-based, and they all have low odor and are pretty easy to clean up. They're all durable and water and UV resistant, and they're pretty easy to maintain in general. But they also need to be applied really well to really well-repaired, They need to be applied to pretty well-prepared wood. If your wood is yellow or gray or dirty, or maybe it's covered with pollen, pollen's a lot out there right now, then the stain's only going to stick to that loose outer layer. That weak layer underneath the stain is going to cause it to fail early and peel right there. So prep gets to be very important with these surface stains. As a general rule, if a stain isn't made primarily for log homes, it probably isn't soft and flexible enough to work really well on them. Those harder stains are going to crack and peel pretty early when used on logs. All these water-based stains dry pretty quickly too, so lap marks can be a challenge if you don't have some experience applying it. Some manufacturers, mostly in the deck and siding stains, also use some silicones and waxes and non-drying oils in their stains to give them more of a water-beading effect. That just spells trouble in a log home stain because while those ingredients make the water beat up, they also repel any water-based caulks and sealants and mortars and chinking, things like that, and they keep them from sticking very well. That's important to keep in mind because even if you have a chinkless style log home, you still have doors and windows, and those still need to be sealed well against the water intrusion using a caulk or sealant. It's Sashco's strong opinion that silicones and waxes and non-drying oils really don't have any place on a log home. If we look at the types of surface stains that are out there, acrylics are really the main type of surface stains. They can be flexible and long-lasting, and they're also permeable to moisture vapor, meaning that when water gets into the wood, it can evaporate and move out through the stain rather than being trapped in the wood where it can cause rot. Acrylics can be used all over the exterior and interior logs. Urethanes are another type of surface stain. Those are so tight that they're not permeable to water vapor, so they tend to actually trap the water and promote rot in wood. Urethanes should not be used on the main exterior or interior logs, but are great on floors and staircases and railings and places like that see a lot of foot traffic. They're excellent at resisting the foot traffic. So feel free to use them in all those places. Epoxies aren't used very much on log homes because they usually fail quickly in the UV light, and they generally form pretty hard films. But we do use those sometimes to repair some rot spots and things like that. So if you do have some epoxy repair compounds in there, it's important to actually go back in and stain over them to just keep that in good condition. If we move on to shallow penetrating oil stains, this is a kind that most people have experience with. These are going to be your traditional alkyd or linseed oil or tung oil stains that they cure up and they dry when they're exposed to the air. They can penetrate down into the wood a bit deeper than the surface stains, and they go in 4 or 5 wood cells deep. Right? Most of these oils are diluted in solvent, so they're thin enough to apply, but some are actually diluted with water instead. That's kind of surprising to a lot of people that oil stains can be in either solvent or water. But we go back in and we actually add some soap to the oils and make it go into the water. Here we have an example of a solvent-based stain, in this case, Sashco's Transformation Log and Timber, and the look that you get from that. In general, these are lasting 3 to 5 years before they need a maintenance coat, but if you keep up in that maintenance, they can last a long time too. Here's a couple other examples of the shallow penetrating oil stains that dry. Stickens has been a co-leader in this market for decades, and now PPG has purchased them and their name is changing to Prolux. Tenafin and Cabot and Mesmers all also make oil stains as well. If we look at the strengths of these shallow penetrating drying oil stains, if you do it right, these stains can be stunningly beautiful. And the oils that get deeper into that wood kind of make little light pockets that shine back almost like a stained glass window. I love that look. They all have pretty good penetration and can be recoated without any troubles. And the water-based versions can be pretty easy to clean up and have low odor and faster dry times. But they are all drying oils. They all start off as little tiny bits of oil that cross-link or combine together to form bigger oils, and that cross-linking never really stops. Eventually, as it continues to cross-link, they all get brittle with age and will crack and peel or erode away. Even our Transformation Log and Timber, which is one of the softest oil-based stains available, will eventually do that. In the water-based versions, the lap marks can be a challenge, and of course, with the solvent-based versions, you just can't escape that solvent and oil odor when they're drying and curing. Let's move on to deep penetrating oil stains. These are oils that never cross-link. They never ever dry. Motor oil is a good example, which your contractors can probably tell you stories about, maybe nightmares. Some people mistakenly put this on their logs years ago, and they're stuck with it. Some stains that you're going to find out there actually combine these non-drying oils with their other stains. You'll find them with the shallow penetrating drying oils, and you'll also find them sometimes in even the acrylics. Well, because these non-drying oils never dry, they continue to soak deep into the wood. And as long as you're putting more oil onto the surface and have some patience, it's going to keep on slowly migrating into the wood. Often it can be found half an inch deep or more on the wood. Here's an example of a deck treated with a non-drying oil to make it beat up water. Wait a minute. Do you really want your log home to beat up water? What happens to your cars when they beat up with water after a rainstorm? If you don't go and dry them off, you're left with your car covered with water spots. It's actually preferable if the stain will sheet the water away so that it doesn't leave those water spots. A couple good examples here. You have Q8 log oil and TWP and Woodguard and Thompson's and stuff like that. The strengths of these non-drying oils are that they're pretty darn forgiving to apply. You're getting no lap marks and no peeling. They're actually pretty good on shingles and fences and some decks and handrails. They're really easy to maintain. But on the weaknesses side, we've got to be careful.
Oh, look, you see, I forgot to put weaknesses on that side.
Weaknesses, yeah.
The right side is still the weaknesses, folks, just so you know. That's a typo on my part.
I didn't even catch that. All right, weaknesses side. So, number one, no caulking or chinking is going to stick to these non-drying oil stains. In fact, the oils can migrate behind your sealants that might be on the wood already and soften them so that they actually lose their adhesion to the wood. That means you can't really seal around your doors and windows effectively. In addition, any stain that you put onto that wood in the future can be affected by these non-drying oils that are already on there. Remember, they're half an inch deep, and that means that those stains might not stick to the wood. In general, these all also have pretty darn poor durability, and they need to be reapplied every year. With all that oil, dirt can be a problem because it just sort of sticks to it, and pollen too, and there can be problems with color transfer too. Imagine if you have a redwood deck off of a living room with white carpet. No homeowner is going to be happy to see red color from the deck on their carpet, but that's what we call color transfer.
And we would just friendly reminder that white carpet is always a bad idea.
It's not in my house.
Not a bad idea.
All right, here's an example. Here we have some Sikaflex of chinking that was applied first, followed by Woodguard, which is a non-drying oil. There are a couple different problems contributing to the failure here. The first is that the non-drying oil can migrate behind the chinking and loosen the adhesion there. But these joints are also way too small to accommodate log movement, so this was kind of bound to fail eventually. We don't want anyone going through our training to experience these kinds of expensive lessons, so be real careful if you're using any of these non-drying oils. And no matter what stain or chinking you might be using, make sure your joints are big enough that they're going to accommodate the movement of the logs.
And I just take a minute here to mention that if you look on the right side of your screen, there's a section called Handouts. Underneath there, we do have a booklet called Keeping the Dream Alive. That is just a general log home finishing educational piece. It's not a commercial for our products. It really just takes you through the process of finishing a log home from beginning to end. And it's going to have a lot of those details, like how big should the joints be when you're caulking. And it's going to go into a little bit more detail on the pros and cons of these stains that we've been talking about. So take a moment to download that document, that book, and then it'll also be emailed out to you as a follow-up tomorrow.
All right. Good reminders. Well, here's bonus time. We didn't tell you that salt stains were going to be here at all, but this is just a brief note on one more type of stain that's out there, and that's the salt stains. Lots of people want a weathered wood look, similar to the picture on the left, which is an ancient Appalachian-style log home that's never seen any stain, at least not that we know of. I was actually there at that home, and it has lots of rot and insect issues, though. On the right, we have somebody who wanted that look, and they bought a beautifully stained log home and then had their contractors strip off all the stain and then try to apply a salt stain. I don't remember if it was Lifetime or Echo Wood Treatment, but it was one of those. And it worked in some areas, but in areas like this beam here, that beam had some other stain on there that penetrated pretty good, and that blocked the salt stain from getting in there and doing its change. Whatever you're using, though, for the salt stains, be aware that none of them are going to protect from the water or the UV or the rot. If you really want this look, there are ways that we can approach this look with the regular stains that are still going to be able to protect the wood. So I'd recommend going that route instead. Well, at Sashco, we take our stains and our competition pretty seriously. We have an exposure fence where we test all of our products side by side with the competition. And on the right, you can see how I filled up a conference room with capture versus the competition stain panels. That's fun for a stain guy like me.
And just so you know, we do go through this testing, not just so that we can not just so that we can compare ourselves to the others, but if somebody is doing better, that drives improvement at our company. We say, okay, they've got a pretty good formula that lasts pretty long. This is all in, we're here in Colorado, so we're a mile high, get a ton of UV exposure. These are facing due south. They get the snow on them, and then all of our freeze-thaw cycles. It's pretty rough life for these panels over the 18 months. Most stain manufacturers will do 6-month exposure tests. We do 18-month exposure tests. So we kind of put them through the rigmarole and see what happens, and it drives improvement around here. You guys can download the results of those exposure tests on our capture and cascade stain. Those, again, is in your handouts. That really shows, and Jim will be going into this in just a second, but really explains the advantage of having a stain that is very elastic.
Totally true. And as you alluded to it, some examples here. Right? Well, perhaps even more important or better than seeing how things work on these little tiny exposure panels that are dimensional lumber and not logs is seeing how they perform in real life. Here we have an example from the Ritz-Carlton Bachelor Gulch. That's up here in our Colorado mountains at about 9,000-foot elevation. The sun and winters are intense up there, making it a great place to challenge even the best stains. Sashco was actually with the Ritz when they built this 8-story log building. It's fantastically complicated and so big that they can only stain about 20% of it every year. So it takes about 5 years to wrap around the building and 5 years with no maintenance for each section. The Ritz initially selected Sikkens log and siding to use, and after about 10 years, they'd gone around the building twice, and they weren't really happy with the results. You can sort of see that on the left there. Sashco was called in, and we proposed using the capture and cascade system on the building, and 6 years later, we went back and visited, and the Ritz was thrilled with the improved performance, and you can see that right there. You can see on the left what the Sikkens log and siding looked like after 5 to 6 years with no maintenance, and on the right, you can see the exact same walls with the exact same exposures, what the capture and cascade looked like after 5 to 6 years with no maintenance. And here's another wall showing the side-by-side performance again. Same walls, same conditions, same time frame, just different years and different stains.
And it's just important to note, the Sikkens is an oil-based stain. It takes more maintenance. It's harder. It's going to crack sooner. Sashco's transformation likely would have experienced something similar, probably not as soon, but similar to the Sikkens, whereas the capture being an acrylic is just more elastic. But you can also see, you don't see a whole lot of wood grain here. You just can't get that beautiful wood grain look that you get out of an oil, out of an acrylic. It just doesn't exist yet.
I'm working on that.
He's working on that.
I'll make a lot of money when that day comes. All right, let's keep moving. We all have a mental vision, I'm sure you do, of what your ideal log home should look like. How do we get that vision translated to the real life wood of our log home? That all comes down to sampling and testing the stain in the right way before you apply it. Here we have an example from a customer who wasn't too happy that her logs came out darker than she had imagined. Wonder what went wrong. It all came down to how she chose her color. In this case, she didn't sample or test any of the stain colors, but simply chose off of a color chart. She wanted the tan pine color on the left, but wound up with a look that was closer to the natural cedar color on the right. Ouch. The problem was this. Sashco, and really all the stain companies for that matter, we show our color differences on some of the whiter colored woods so that the differences between the colors are visible. But lots of wood that's actually used out there is darker than that light wood, and this home was made from fairly dark reddish logs, and they absorb quite a bit of stain too. Keep in mind that the final color that you're going to get is a combination of the transparent or semi-transparent stain with the wood underneath it. If you keep that in mind, you're going to want to test a number of different colors on your wood to find out what really is close to what you want. Here's the best way to double check the stains on your wood. Choose a less conspicuous area on your home and don't use a piece of scrap lumber. Use the real wood that's on your home. Prep it in the exact same way that you want to prep the home when you're going to stain. And then apply the stain the same way too. If you're going to use 2 coats, put 2 coats on. If you're going to put a top coat on, put a top coat on. And again, choose a couple of different colors because it's going to look a little different when it gets there on the wood. Sashco is happy to provide samples, as are most manufacturers, and we all want you to be happy with the color that you choose.
I have a funny story to tell you guys. I had a homeowner call us up who had done great sampling and showed us how they did their sampling and called us up and said that their stain was green. And they sent us the pictures, and we looked at the pictures, and we're like, yeah, that stain does look kind of greenish. And I said, back up and take a picture of the whole wall because maybe it has something to do with how the sun is reflecting. Well, they backed up. They had a blue tarp sitting on the ground in front of this wall, and the sun was reflecting off of the blue color off of that tarp just so that it looked green. I told them, move the tarp away from the wall and then take a look. And they called me up 5 minutes later and they said, it's fine. So keep in mind that things around that you're using, being reflected on the sun with a semi-transparent stain, you may get a totally different look. The same thing happens with paint. Gray will look green in the right light. So just pay attention to that kind of thing before you freak out and think that you have a green stain, unless you wanted a green stain, in which case you're good to go.
But we are always happy to talk to you.
Yes, we are. Do that problem solving when that kind of thing happens.
That's fun. I have to be careful actually what color shirt I wear in the lab if I'm looking at colors, because that same thing will happen. If I'm looking at a stain board in front of me, if I'm wearing a red shirt, it's going to have a reddish cast on it.
Yep. I'm going to have Jim speed through these next slides here because we're running low on time and I want to leave time for questions and answers. But if you are in the process of having your log home built, it's not started being built yet, you still have time on the design side, you'll want to keep these next tips in mind. Those of you who already have the home constructed and didn't keep some of these things in mind, sometimes you can do some retrofitting, sometimes you can't. Just be aware that you will need to do more frequent maintenance checks. So go ahead, Jim.
All righty. Well, for those of you who are in the planning phases, let's look at those opportunities to make your home last longer and the stain that's on it. The overall theme here is that water is the #1 enemy of your home. So first thing, gutters and downspouts. This is good even for those of you who already have homes. Gutters and downspouts are a huge help on any log or wood structure, but they have to work. Here you see a gutter system that's in disrepair, and it's actually leaking down and splashing water down onto the roof, and off of the roof it's splashing back up onto the logs. And you can see how that's ruined the stain, and it's probably even rotting the logs underneath. Gutters and downspouts can be added to almost any home. Maybe I can highlight that area. See that area?
That's all rotting. And just so you know, I went to a meeting with the Great Lakes Log Crafters Association, a bunch of guys who are just amazing craftsmen with logs, but they'll tell you that something like that, you're going to have to do some major log replacement, and that could cost you $60,000. So taking care of these design things up front so you don't run into the big ticket items like a $60,000 rot repair, do it now while you can.
Yep. And gutters and downspouts are cheap, so at least compared to that.
Yeah, comparatively.
All right, we got to move. Eave overhangs are your next option here. And if you have very short eaves and no gutters, then you're going to get something that looks more like this. Notice how that water is going to be falling off of the roof 2 stories down and then splashing up onto the logs. And you can actually see where that water is hitting on the grass down here. And it's splashing 4 or 5 logs up high. Notice how that stain is failing on that wall, on the lower section of the wall, because of that water. And if you look close, you even see that a corner log on that bottom has actually rotted off. Large eave overhangs are great at protecting your home from water damage and UV damage too.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of that, log ends that stick out at the corners or at roof lines and things like that usually end up rotting. Here on the left, you can see some pretty well protected log ends that are doing okay, but you notice the ones on the right, those exposed logs are kind of near this central peak here, and they're already showing some signs of early water damage. Logs like those are going to need more maintenance to keep them in good condition. That might mean, in some cases, yearly restaining. On a side note, this is also a good example over here on the right of some of the types of early water damage that we want homeowners to be looking for so that they know when it's time to do some maintenance. These may be a little too far gone for easy maintenance, but if you catch some of that damage a little bit earlier, that's just time to put another coat of stain on. Foundations are another way that we can keep water off of the logs. We like to see logs at least 18 inches off the ground or even higher if your normal snow load is higher in that area.
I was telling Jim this is kind of a funny picture because they got the foundation really good. They've got that foundation well above the snow line, but their eave overhangs aren't all that wide, and they don't have gutters everywhere, so they got halfway.
I'm still trying to figure out where the downspout is for this gutter on this roof.
Yeah, it's missing. They have a gutter, but we don't know where it goes, so.
I'm not sure. All right, a few examples for us. Notice how large these eave overhangs are? That keeps the stain on the logs well protected from water and sunlight. Here's another one. You can see closer to noon how far down that shadow is on that wall and how large those eave overhangs are. That's a lot of protection from the sunlight and all the UV damage that comes from it. Here's kind of a bad example of doing several things incorrectly. We have a very short eave overhang. In fact, you can see the drip line right here. And also, that's allowing a lot of splashback up onto the logs. But note that the logs are also right down there at the ground level. And we would expect that these logs are going to be prone to rotting, just like a log would if you left it in a forest floor. Well, if that's a bad example, what's a great example? Surprise! Here we have the Horyuji Temple in Japan, which is the oldest log structure in the world. At 1,410 years, they must have done something right. Note that these have very large eave overhangs, and they're really so big that they function as gutters as well. and the foundation is a good 4 feet or so off the ground, so there's no splashback possible onto the wood. While we might not all want a pagoda-style log home, I don't, we can sure see that keeping the water off the wood can really pay off in the long run. 1,400 years is a long time.
Yep, absolutely. So that's really our presentation, taking you through things. What we covered, color selection, different types of stains, how to sample stain, and then, of course, a quick rush through the design elements. Again, download that Keeping the Dream Alive booklet. That's going to give you more detail on a lot of these things, kind of get you basic education so you can get a plan of action into place right away. So I want to open it up for questions. Again, type your questions in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll get some of your questions answered. Our phone number is on there for our customer service team here at Sashco. They are all trained on all of this information. They go through our Zero Failures Contractor Training Seminar, so they can answer your questions just as well as Jim and I can. They'd be happy to answer your questions. So
that'll be during normal business hours because they're actually closed right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. They are closed right now. So I have a question coming up here. So what are good questions to ask of a contractor to determine if they are qualified? That's an excellent question. You always want to ask the normal questions of any contractor. Are they licensed? Are they insured? Can they give you references? But then you want to find out, have they actually ever done any work on a log home, specifically on a log home? Those who've done work on log homes can generally do work on wood-sided homes as well. But you want to find out, what their experience is. Jim, what do you want to
Absolutely.
add to that?
I think really diving into, do they know how to really care for log structures? If they have experience there, if they've had some training, I know some of those guys that you're going to catch out there actually have gone through our Zero Failures course. That's always a good step too. Not that all of them have to go through that to be a good contractor, but you're really looking to see, do they know enough to take care of your log home?
Mm-hmm. Ask for references. There's just a lot of good questions that you can ask of your contractor. The other thing that I would recommend is that you go onto our website or onto Log Home Living's website. There's an article that we've done together that talks about 11 tips for finding a good log home contractor, and it's going to discuss some of those questions. We always recommend that your contractor explain to you in detail how they plan to do the work. A lot of contractors who don't know log homes are going to tell you they're just going to do a light pressure wash to get rid of dirt and dust and pollen. If you have a major restoration to do, that's not going to do the trick. So read through that Keeping the Dream Alive book that we talked about, and then download that article. Go and read that article. Again, that's on our website at sashco.com and also on Log Home Living's website, and they can, that was going to help you know as well. The other thing that I will sort of put in a plug for Sashco here, we have a contractor, find a contractor directory on our website. All of those folks have gone through our Zero Failures wood training seminar, save about 5 of them who haven't actually gone through the class yet, but we know have done log homes for years and years. So we are confident in their skills. So you can always go and look for contractors there who you can be confident have who've done a lot of log homes. So hopefully that helps answer your question there. Another question that just came in, how long should one wait for application of the first coat of stain once the log home is built? And this is up in New Hampshire. And to go along with that, does the waiting time for application of the first coat of stain depend on whether logs are kiln dried?
Well, you guys who are building out there know, or who have built, know they can take months to actually build the home. And by the time you're actually done building that home, it's going to have seen quite a bit of weathering out there, really. Once it's all built and everything else, I think you can start staining really right away. But you do want to make sure you prepare that surface pretty good. And that's probably the one thing you want to do when it's time to stain. You want to take off any of that yellowed wood that's on there. So that might be power washing, maybe with a little bit of brightener like a CPR, which is an oxygen bleach, kind of like OxyClean. That'll take off the yellowed wood on there and be getting it into good condition so that you can then stain it. And then letting it dry before you actually apply the stain is important. So use a moisture meter and make sure that moisture content comes down to below 18%, probably below 14 if you can, and go from there. Now, waiting if it's kiln dried or not,
that kind of depends on where you are in the country.
Yeah.
You know, kiln drying for someone in Pennsylvania, you don't have to wait a whole lot. Your logs will be probably pretty darn close to their moisture equilibrium once they've gone from the log yard and the kiln to their new location. But say you're in Arizona or someplace else that's really dry, you're going to need to wait for those logs to dry even more, believe it or not, even though they've been kiln dried. And, you know, they'll kiln dry to a certain percentage. Sometimes it'll be 14, sometimes it'll be 12. You know, in coastal Alaska, those homes are actually probably going to go up in their moisture content level as they come to their moisture equilibrium. So just keep that in mind. You want to be at that 19% or lower for sure. But if you're in a really dry area of the country, you want to wait a little while longer before you stain your logs. That's just the safer thing to do. So keep that in mind.
But in general, if you're building a home, it's going to be taking at least weeks, even for the quick homes. And you'll probably be pretty well equilibrated by the time that time is up, for the outer shell anyways. If you're working with green logs, that might be the place where you might want to wait a little bit longer. You might want to let green logs weather a couple of months before you really put a stain on there.
Yep, absolutely. Another question that we have here, do you have stain samples that can be purchased to try out on your logs? We do have stain samples, but you may not purchase them. We give them to you for free. So feel free to go onto our website, Sashco.com. Again, you're going to choose the log home products once you get to that landing page for Sashco.com, but look at the stains. On each stain, under the products for each of the stains, there's a form that you can fill out. You can also call the customer service number that's on there. They are happy to take your information over the phone and send you the colors that you want. So free stain samples. We always recommend that you sample quite a few. We include 3 on our forms. Most people want to do at least 3. If you want to get more colors, again, just call that 800 number. They are more than happy to help you with that. And then one other question that I have here is, I used an oil-based stain in the past on my home. Can I switch to a water-based stain now? That's going to depend on the kind of oil-based stain it was.
Yes. In general, what I like to tell people, because of that difference between the 2 different kinds of oil stains, the drying oils and the non-drying oils, what I like to tell people is to go up to the logs with a spray bottle of water, even a bucket of water, a glass of water, whatever you got, and splash some on the wall. Now, if it beads up, you know you might have some problems in there. So sand off some of the stain and get it down to kind of like new wood down there and try that again. If the water will soak right into the wood, you're probably going to be okay going on with a water-based stain. But if it beads up, then you know that you're probably better off sticking with a solvent-based stain going forward, because you probably have a non-drying oil in there, and the solvent-based stains, whether they're the drying oils or the non-drying oils, those will go over those previous non-drying oil stains pretty reliably.
Right. And what we always tell people, especially those who have bought a resale log home, they have no clue what was used on there in past. it is safest to assume, even after you've done all those tests, it's safest to assume that it's an oil-based stain. So it's probably safest to stick with an oil-based stain. Don't want to guarantee that, but that's generally what is the safest thing to do, when you're going that way.
I will add in that if you're ever taking the surface down to bare wood again, I personally love Capture Cascade, and I would recommend going to Capture Cascade myself anytime you're going down to bare wood, as long as that bare wood will absorb the water.
Right. And then one more question that we have here. What determines the shine on the stained logs?
That all comes out to the coating on the outermost coating on that log. And we can actually change that in different ways as a formulator, as a chemist here. Usually the resins that I'm using are actually glossy to begin with. So I usually have to add something to reduce the gloss and reduce that shine down just a little bit. In the Transformation Log and Timber Oil Stain, I actually don't want to take the gloss down from there, because if I do that, I'm going to be hurting the beauty of that log. It's just not going to look the same. But on the Capture Cascade side, our top coat is the Cascade coat, and we have a semi-gloss version and also a matte version. Interesting, the Ritz-Carlton pictures you saw earlier in the presentation, they were actually our first customer for the Cascade matte version.
And they were kind of our test case as well, but
yeah. I simply added more flatteners to that coating so that it would be a flat.
So it really just depends on the brand of stain that you choose and how it's formulated, whether or not you get that shine. So certainly do your sample so that you get the sheen that you want. You can, with our clear coat on the Capture and Cascade, you can actually combine the semi-gloss and the matte to get something in between if you want as well. Not all stains can you do that with, so just keep that in mind. I think that's it for now. So I'm going to hand things back over to Amanda. Keep in mind you can call our phone number there and email our customer service team. Go on our website. If you have any other questions, we are always happy to answer your questions and talk to you guys. We love talking to log homeowners.
And thank you all for joining us tonight. We love talking to you guys.
Jim, Carice, thank you both for a phenomenal presentation. We hope everyone enjoyed their information tonight. As Carice did mention, we will be sending out an email with the link to this recording of the event and also links to the additional PDFs that were included alongside of it. If you had a question that did not get answered tonight, they've left the information to contact them. Please do. And you should see that email with the additional information inside of the next 24 hours. On behalf of our sponsor, Sashco, and Log Home Living, we would like to thank you for joining us. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.